Welcome into another Inside Carolina post-practice scoop session. I'm Tommy Ashley, that's Jason Staples. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Jason, I guess day 2 in pads today we saw here Tuesday over at the indoor facility and on the turf and the AstroTurf, or the turf and grass field out there. A lot to talk about again today. I feel like we're going to start this one the way we started the first day last week. Is tempo in practice has really ramped up.
Yeah, I think if you look at prior practices, and even going back to spring last year, prior years, I'm much more pleased by the overall level of tempo, and especially today, we could see a lot more today about this than we could when they were in shorts. The physicality of this practice compared to prior practices that we've seen, I think there was a lot of good there in that respect from this group. You could see one of the things that I love the most. You know this. I've harped on this for years. Teams need to spend a lot of time in goal line and red zone.
Yep.
And as I understand it, they're doing basically a red zone goal line segment or two every padded practice this camp.
Love it.
I love it, and like we were sitting there. We got to watch their red zone period, their goal line period, and I'm standing there and I'm hearing Coolio, Gangsta's Paradise, and watching them in goal line there, and I'm thinking, man, this takes me back.
Yep.
This is real football. This is how this is supposed to be, right? So that right there alone makes me feel a lot better about where they're going in that. And you know, I think one of the other things that has to be considered there is that also, I think, is a testament to what they feel like about their depth. Because you can tackle more, you can bang more, and do more of that physical stuff if you feel good about your depth. And
Right.
and I think it's evident from what we saw today that they feel better about, you know, say the top 3 guys at each of their spots than they have really since Mack's been here.
Yeah, they're really working the 1s and 2s hard and encouraging players to get into the 1s and 2s. That's one thing I saw, is that you will lose your position because there's a guy behind you that wants it more than you do. And that's what cannot happen for this North Carolina team. But also the toughness factor that depth and physicality brings in, you really find out who's ready to go, who wants to be part of those 1s and 2s.
And I think part of the thing that's helped them is that I think it's pretty evident that this freshman class, many of whom were here in the spring as well, but this freshman class, I think the way to put it is that there are more football players in this class than they've had in any class since Mack's gotten here. That you've got more guys who've showed up who have a little bit more nastiness to them. Maybe not as highly touted in terms of ranking for some of those guys. Some of them were still highly ranked. But you can look at some of these guys, and this would get to number 2 for us already. We were going to do top 5 things, but number 2.
He's going to jump ahead.
I'm going to jump ahead. You look at Benfield. That guy, I walked over at one point when we were watching the goal line. I was like, did you just see what 68 just did? You're like, no, I missed it. And we watched again, and he did something very similar the next play. I watched 68. This is a true freshman at guard. Take one of the defensive linemen, drive him about 4 yards, and put him on his back. We haven't seen a whole lot of that around here.
We have
like
not.
That.
And we'll protect the lives of the innocent. We will not tell you which one that, but it was an impressive move from a guy who's been on campus months and not years.
That guy, I'm telling you right now, that guy, and the next play, he was 4 yards into the end zone, didn't put a guy on his back, but again, 4 yards into the end zone, pushing a guy back. And 2 plays later is a little pass or whatever, and completely got the angle, sealed it off, and, you know, just stonewalled a guy. You're talking about 3 absolute top shelf reps against guys that are playing.
Yep.
Right? That guy, don't be surprised if he's on the field this year, sooner than later, because that's a spot they needed help. I mean, I said it after the shorts practice. I trust about 3.5 of these 5 offensive linemen. If that guy can make sure, if Benfield can make sure that he actually knows where he's supposed to be and all that, that makes it 4.5.
Yep.
because he now is one of the guys that I know I can trust in terms of the physicality, the ability to deliver power with that second step, the quickness to be able to move. You know, you want to have enough depth that you don't play a true freshman 900 snaps over the course of the year. So, you know, you work him in a little bit, but that's a guy that's going to play. And another guy that stood out, Norwood, was another guy in one-on-ones who had a really nice showing in the one-on-ones. Some other guys that maybe were a little older didn't have the best showings in one-on-ones, which, you know me, I like to go down, it's a line of scrimmage game. I like to see who's physical and who's not. We watched, I watched Laura, 92, the young defensive tackle, get up under the pads of a veteran offensive guard and actually throw him, like both feet off the ground, throw him for a win in one-on-one. Again, these are young guys that are starting to display some quickness and some physicality at positions where they needed depth and they needed guys that are going to play like that. Those guys, like you said, some of the other guys, if there's a little bit too much soft on this team, those guys that are soft are not going to have as much room to be able to do that and to be able to just coast and still be on the football field and enjoy the benefits of being a Division I football player as easily now that some of these other guys are stepping in and contending. So that was one of the things to me, the physicality and some of the young bucks on both the offensive and defensive lines. Jacoby Cowan, by the way, had a gorgeous win.
Continues to play well.
That guy's going to play. You now have, with Cowan's emergence, and he impressed me more than once today, with his emergence, you got 4 guys you can trust on the edge. They're going to rotate all 4 because those guys have earned their reps. And that means you're better in the fourth quarter. That means you're better in the second half of the season because you've been rotating those guys. To me, that is the combination of a little bit more physicality and higher tempo and a little bit better depth and physicality from especially the younger guys on both the offensive and defensive lines. Also shout out to Greenberg, who had a win. D3 guy stepping in, had an absolute stonewall win, did not move more than about half a yard in one-on-one pass protection drill. These are guys that, you know, that makes this team better, especially a team that is going to be more of a line of scrimmage football team this year with Omari and Hampton and all of that. Those are the real positives that I took away from today.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the show, folks, but we got plenty more here with Jason Staples on the Inside Carolina's post-practice look, or whatever you want to call it. We call it top 5 takeaways, however you want to say, but I'll build on what you talked about right there. With Banfield, with Janai Norwood, with Greenberg, just because you're on this team and you've been on this team for a while, multiple seasons for some, doesn't mean you're going to play. The coaching staff, and that's one thing we hear constantly, is if you're not going to play tough, we'll say it that way, and you're going to play soft or be soft or get banged up or whatever, you're going to sit and watch, and they're going to move on without you. Banfield, Janai Norwood, 2 of the guys, the young guys, not the most highly ranked players in the world. A lot of people that watch this follow Don Callahan's recruiting, and it's all about stars. Well, you got to be a football player first, and you can have all the stars and not really love the game and not really be tough enough. You're going to watch these young guys, and we'll see that more this year, I think, than we've ever seen because of that depth. And they've got the ability to say, we're going to put you over here to watch. We're going to play these guys that want it more, and I think it's interesting.
There are some 3rd, 4th, and 5th year guys in this program whose reps are basically going to be taken by some of those young guys.
Absolutely.
And not just because it's an even deal, but because the young guys are just better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a good thing at this stage of camp to look at and go, that guy who looked like he might be a player in spring took the step forward, and he's a legit at least co-starter. Yeah. At some of those spots. That's huge.
Yeah, and that'll move us on to 3. So 1, toughness and tempo. 2, offensive line, young guys stepping up. 3, quarterback play. And I think today we saw some separation and are starting to get some answers. Still a long ways till August 29th against Minnesota, but we're starting to get some answers on where everybody stands here.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there was some, not just separation at the very top, but there were tiers in what we saw. I think in terms of separation, I thought today Max Johnson was clearly the number 1 guy. Like in terms of what I saw in performance, in terms of location, in terms of managing the offense confidently, I thought Johnson was the best of the bunch. And I thought there was some separation between him and Harrell, which there really hadn't been prior to this fall. I thought Harrell was at least as good as him in the spring. I think right now Johnson has started to separate himself a little bit. Harrell actually still looked better to me than he's looked in the past for the most part. There was one play I know he'd love to have back, and there were a couple miscommunications between quarterbacks and receivers that have to get cleaned up. And I'm not as optimistic about the receiver position as I would like to be coming out of this practice. I think there's some talent there. There's some veterans there. They're going to have to figure out who's ready to actually play and make plays.
Yep.
You want guys who, when you put the ball in their hands, it's going to change the scoreboard and in the right direction. Right, not guys who ran that route 3 yards too deep and now it's going 6 in the other direction. Or how many drops did we see today?
That's what I was going to say. We saw a lot of footballs on the ground today, and there's a difference, right? There's a difference in a drop and an inaccurate pass. I think you can cure the drops, easier than you can cure the inaccuracy. What you mentioned, though, about miscommunication is that's something that concerned me a little bit and will give me pause as they get closer to the season if it's not cleaned up, is there were too many miscommunications between quarterback and receiver.
Yep.
And one of them would have wound up in a 98-yard pick six for, I believe, Will Hardy.
Yep.
And so you've got to get those situations cleaned up. I agree with you. Max Johnson appears to be the guy. We've got a long ways to go. They're going to play both. I think there's a pretty good sense that they'll play both of these guys.
And they're going to have different packages for them. They're different quarterbacks.
And that's the catchy thing, and we can talk about this more as the season goes along, and I think as an Inside Carolina Roundtable is that you can't really have the same offense for both guys because they are so different. And a lot of people talk about how it's a great thing to have two quarterbacks with very different skill sets. I don't necessarily believe that to be the case because you have to flip over to the other side of the playbook when you insert one of those guys in. We'll talk about that more. Jason hit on our next topic. One more
on the quarterbacks.
Yep.
So I think there's a little bit of separation between Max and Harrell, and then I think there's a pretty big separation between those two and 3 and 4. Yep. I think 3 and 4 right now are closer together than
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
So 1 and 2, there's some separation. There's significant separation between 2 and 3. And frankly, I thought 17 had himself a pretty good day today. I was really encouraged about the future in terms of that because you got some tools to work with. Keep him improving, keep him working with Clyde Christensen, keep him doing what he's doing. But he made some throws in 7-on-7. He managed some things pretty well. I thought actually that was a really good showing from him. And Jacoby, how heavy do you think he was when we saw him at the end of summer?
Oh man,
north of 245 at least.
He's a big fella. He's 6'1",
He's 6 foot and a half.
A little bit over that, and he is he's quite stocky.
Yeah, and I mean he's dropped weight since we saw him even in the first shorts practice, but that kind of tells you where he was coming in mentally into this camp. So to me it's a pretty clear 1 and 2. And then 3 and 4, where those guys are not really contending for the starting reps at this stage.
Yeah, and I think 17, obviously Michael Merdinger, another guy that's not superly high rated, but he showed some things.
Throws a pretty ball.
And a couple things that before we move on to the wide receivers specifically is when the live action happens, all of the guys except one look different. Mm-hmm. And I thought Max Johnson is the one that looked the same consistently between 7-on-7s, reps, and then live action. And I think that is the key here. We'll see what happens.
He looked like a guy that played 2,000 snaps in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, he's played a ton of football, so he's had a lot of opportunities to see live action, and you can really tell it today, I think. We'll keep monitoring that as we go. Wide receivers, we talked about balls being on the ground. Right many inaccurate throws, some drops. I thought Alex Taylor is a guy. I've been high on Jordan Shipp, but Alex Taylor, number 0, really stepped up. He mossed Elijah
Huzzy, which doesn't happen easily.
and made a great catch there. And then some other guys, Vari Green caught a pass, but he's had some drop issues. Paul Billups
will play this year.
Yeah, and Culliver is one of those guys. If these guys can stay healthy, they're really going to push guys like J.J. Jones. Kobe Paysor needs to stay healthy, but he's looked good in the spring. And then, you've got the tight ends that can do it all. But we've talked about the three-headed tight end thing in the wide receiver room.
It's two. It's two.
It's two, with the possibility of a young guy breaking into that top three.
19 has to show me more than what he's shown in pads.
Yeah.
He's going to have to be more physical. He's going to have to be a better player to earn his snaps.
Yeah.
And
one thing about pads. Yeah. One thing about pads is it separates.
You can't hide who you are
Yeah.
in those pads.
Yeah, because once the pads start popping, then guys separate. So we'll see. So the wide receiver room is something to watch. I think there's a lot of young talent. They've got to get on the same page with the quarterbacks.
Gotta catch the football.
And catch the football. Nate McCullum has looked really good. He's got whatever was troubling him last year, injury-wise and everything else, being in a new program, he has really stepped up and looked good in practice.
He's the one guy we haven't seen drop a ball.
Yeah, and that's par for the course, except for Virginia. Whatever happened in that game.
Yeah.
So he is a guy that has stepped up. They're going to be fine at wide receiver. Still got to find that number one guy. Alex Taylor.
Stock up. Billups, stock up.
Yep.
Everybody else kind of level or stock down.
A lot of green arrows and flat lines, but yeah, I agree with those. Number 5, where you want to go?
So, again, I think if we look at the composition of this team, I think a lot of North Carolina fans are going to have vertigo. Because this has been a place where a lot of people have come to watch a lot of offensive football for a while. And I'll be honest, as long as some of the young guys keep coming on the defensive interior, this might be a defense-first football team.
And that says a lot. And I don't know what it says exactly, to be honest with you.
Well, what it says is that with a lot more depth, they're comfortable thudding a little bit more, hitting a little bit more in practice.
Yep.
You're seeing a little bit more physicality. And I think also where they are with the safety position, the secondary, and I mentioned this in our post-shorts practice thing. I'll mention it again because now we can actually see it with the pads on. I think Jeff Collins is going to be really confident in this group of defensive backs.
Yep.
Not just the corners. I think the safeties he's going to be confident in. And when you're confident that, okay, if we leave that guy with a C gap coming from the safety position, he's not going to be in the wrong gap, or he's not going to overrun it or just flat out miss a tackle, and now you got a 70-yard play. When you can count on your safeties coming up and making plays in the backfield, when you can count on those guys. Caleb Cost had a tackle for loss.
Yep.
When you I think Boykins had some contact near the line of scrimmage. Harris,
Jakeem Harris continues to look pretty good.
Harris is a guy that changes the complexion of what they can do defensively, because you've got a guy that's reliable in getting guys on the ground if they get past that second level. So I think just defensively, they're going to be a lot more confident in terms of what they're doing in the secondary. And we saw again, they are not shy. They're gonna bring pressure from everywhere.
Everywhere, literally everywhere.
And there is not going to be a lot like when they're calling vanilla defenses. There's still going to be sprinkles on it this year, and that's just basically how they're going about things. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be as good offensively as they've been, because look at the receiver position and look at the quarterback position. You're probably not going to be as explosive as you've been there. But you can be a better team potentially if you get things taken care of on the defensive side of the ball. You get guys on the ground and you play sort of old school. There was an old school feel to this practice in certain respects, more than I've seen, which warms my heart.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's the thing I'll be interested to see. I mean, it's still early in camp. Still got to stay healthy. Still got to maintain the physicality coming in. But that first game against the Minnesota team that wants to ground and pound is going to be a physical football game.
Yeah, and go back to what we sort of talked about last week when we wrapped up. It's more balanced. It's not going to be lean heavy on a quarterback to make plays to win games. It's going to be a group effort, a concerted effort across the board. If they can get consistent play at quarterback, consistent play at wide receiver, you've got a running back that is a game changer. You've got an offensive line that I think can be better and do some things better. You get that defense to step up. And I think as we're recording this, Jeff Collins will be talking to the media post-practice today, and you'll hear all of that on Inside Carolina and see the scoop from Adam and Jeremiah and Evan and Sophie, our new video intern, will be dropping stuff. So it's just a ton of content going on. But for Jason Staples and Tommy Ashley, Keenan Stadium, the field,
Chris Smith Field at Keenan Stadium.
The Chris Smith, the turf. It's amazing how they can turn the turf into grass for them to play some football during the summer and then get it back like this. 4 weeks until they're here, a little over 3 weeks until they're in Minnesota. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com.
Woo!
And congruityhr.com /Tar Heels to take care of all of your business needs. Thanks for listening.